Hey, hi, this is Kate Rains giving a quick lecture on the kind of overview, the introduction of multicultural children's literature in Education 121. Boom. There you go. Some things one can see for oneself, other things depend on the telling of the tale. I think you might get tired of hearing me say that because I really love this quote and I really love how it applies to this class. Click, clack, moo. How's that type? Looks like a seemingly innocuous, beautiful, cute little tale, which it is. But it's also a book about anarchy, which is kind of interesting when you think about some of the subtle messages or not so subtle messages that can be imparted in children's books. They're pretty powerful tools, children's books. All sorts of subject matter is covered, and it can be covered in a developmentally appropriate way so that you're not just pounding in all these like crazy ideas into kids, but that you're giving them some ways to think more about inclusiveness and just accepting people that are different from themselves. Children's books have so many messages that can be imparted, and some really good stuff, and that's what we're going to be looking at in this class throughout the whole class. Maybe you can already tell I love children's books, so I want to share something with you that is more amazing than the solar eclipse that happened a couple years ago. Oh no, it happened pretty quickly. When did it happen? Like a couple months ago? This is from a couple years ago. That's Zoe, my daughter, looking up into the sky in a safe manner. Harry Potter saved my life. That's the amazing thing, right? That's the solar eclipses thing I want to talk about. There's a particular study that was done a while ago now, 2014, but still really interesting, I think, that it showed that if you read the Harry Potter series, like there's a lot of them, right? Five, six, that it found that even if you read just a couple of the books, that kids were more likely to not be such asshats. I mean, more likely to feel more embracive about their fellow citizens, less prejudices, less ways to other people, if that makes any sense. So where was Harry Potter when these little tiki torch-bearing white supremacists crashed the town of, I can't even remember, this was several years ago. Obviously, they didn't read these books. And how about when this was taking over the Michigan Capitol for a while? Gonna take more than a couple thousand for these folks to kind of change their mind, maybe, right? And this one, January 6th, not sure there's any hope. Maybe they read some Harry Potter. I'm not sure. And I'm being kind of a little sarcastic here in some ways, but what I want to stress is the impact of children's books. Because the deal is, even though we have all this media now, I can tell you with my granddaughter, Rooney, and I can tell you as a preschooler, looking at kids' faces when I read them books, how captivating and enticing books still are. They're a medium, right? But they're still can supersede all the other social media and all the other ways we have of packing in big, powerful messages. It's really amazing. So what does it have to do with multicultural children's literature? All the stuff that I'm going to be talking about. There's so many tie-ins. I want to tell you for a second about this book, The Story of Little Black Sambo. Awful, racist, inaccurately portrayed story. An interesting, cool story, but really bad illustration story that was published in 1899 and is still in print. So that means it's still in the hands of children, imparting some really not so great messages, right? So the Council on Interracial Books have determined, and this is, I think, a really powerful quote, that if children are repeatedly exposed to racist and sexist attitudes in books, that overexposure can gradually make these messages, these stereotypical false messages, as a tool of, oh my gosh, wait, let me start over on this. Okay, I don't want to stop my thing here. Okay. The Council on Interracial Books for Children found that children are repeatedly exposed to racist and sexist attitudes in books, and that this overexposure to these messages gradually distorts their perceptions, and that they accept these as the real deal. So basically, they're given all these messages that are wrong. They're stereotypical. It's, that whole idea of the single story. They're just wrong. But if they keep reading these kinds of books or getting these kinds of messages, they think, yeah, this is the real deal. I mean, we all kind of do that, and then it's hard to undo these stereotypes. So stereotypes are accepted as reality, and we're going to talk a lot about stereotypes of all sorts of different identities and cultures and ethnicities in this class. And that's a kind of scary thing, right? That stereotypes are accepted as a reality. I think so. So what does this have to do with that? Something we're going to talk about. Books objectifying girls. They're so beautiful. We only want to look at our appearance. There's a real focus on white beauty ideals. I mean, it goes on and on. There's a million different books and they've gotten better. And I'm just looking at these Barbie books just because they were easy to grab. But there's still some really pervasive messages about how important it is for a little girl to be beautiful. And it's imparted in all sorts of books still, even as we get better with it. That appearance for girls and women is so important. So what's the connection? To this. So Scholastic Books, great. It's a great book company because they publish some really good books for really inexpensively, so that a lot of kids can go to their book fairs at school and buy a book, for not too much money, and take it home and it's theirs. So it's a great idea. But then when we look at some of the books that are out there and that are totally acceptable, like this is Grimtastic Girls. Red Riding Hood gets lost. There's Red Riding Hood, and who's the big bad wolf? I really think there is connection with these kinds of books to this kind of stereotype. And again, focus on appearance, the male gaze, all of that. And I think it goes hand in hand with this. I'm getting kind of radical here maybe for you, but when we objectify girls and women, when you objectify somebody, right, then you can do things that you really wouldn't do if you humanized them. This book has been out forever, The Five Chinese Brothers. It's once upon a time there were 5 Chinese brothers, and they all looked exactly alike, right? So these books are still out there with just portraying really awful, sexist, single story stereotypes. That's a photo that I took. I've gotten kind of lazy, so I think it's about a year and a half old, but I know that it's still there. That's at World Market. It's like right there, the book, 1955, right? So what's the connection? I'm going to keep on going here. One more. Okay, I is for Indian. Let's play Indian. And, that's all that maybe you've heard, like, my culture is not a costume, right? So what's the connection to objectifying whole tribes, a whole culture of people into these little easy, fun, oh, wow, yes, you too can, be a redskin, right? So great quote, our nation was born in genocide when it embraced the doctrine that the original American Indian was an inferior race. So what's the connection? I'm going to ask that a lot. And really, the question should be, like, how do we change stuff? How do we help counter sexist and racist messages and other isms that we'll be discussing? Pretty simple in some ways, but pretty hard to do. Change the message. And voila, that's where I think multicultural children's literature comes in. The good stuff, the real stuff, the stuff that is written by people of that ilk, of that culture, ethnicity, identity, and giving us respect and expansive look out into the world and not these stereotypes, right? Because I love this quote, gonna read it. Quality multicultural Literature provides an opportunity for all children to see themselves in books, fosters a positive self-esteem, and cultivates respect and empathy and acceptance of people. Wow. So there, one more time. It's like how cool that these books can help make the world a better place. I mean, I say it all the time. Really great multicultural children's literature can save the world, as far as I'm concerned. So in this class, we look at multicultural children's literature in this way. This is the definition. There's so many. Literature about racial, ethnic, and identity minority groups that are culturally and socially different from the Anglo-Saxon majority of the U.S., whose large and middle class values and customs are most represented in American literature. So to simplify it, multicultural literature includes literature about people who are considered to be outside of the mainstream of society and have been marginalized in some way. So, bottom line, books other than those of the dominant culture. And in our society in North America, our dominant culture is male, white, heterosexual, Christian, temporarily able-bodied, youthful, and has access to wealth and resources. So that's kind of the standard, and then everything else, is kind of drifts off to either side in hopes of being as close to the standard as possible. Right? So that's the perspective here in this class, and that's what we'll be discussing in our academic articles and some examples of books and all sorts of things. So that's what I consider the basic level of multicultural literature, just everything outside of that dominant culture, right? So, you didn't think in this class that maybe we were going to be like really getting down in the weeds about stuff. Here's the deal. I think that there is a big deal about multicultural children's literature because it does a lot of stuff to counter something that many, many children's books do. Many children's books, by virtue of who's written them, who has more value in the society, what kind of stereotypes we're going to continue to perpetuate about other people that don't have as much value in the society. What that means is that children's books are a really easy tool that helps reinforce that dominant culture. And that's kind of a scary thing. And we'll look at some examples of that, and we'll show some ways that have really helped counter that whole thing. But it's a lot of work. So the dominant group, again, is like, I already said it, right? Overwhelmingly white, keeps people blah, 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 blah. So it's there. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's a political thing. It is. And so I'm just going to read this. I'll try not to read it too fast. I just really like this quote. When those who have the power to name and to socially construct reality choose not to see you or hear you, whether you are dark-skinned, old, disabled, female, or speak with a different accent or dialect than theirs, when someone with the authority of, say, a teacher, big powerful thing, describes the world and you are not in it, there's a moment of psychic disequilibrium, as if you looked into a mirror and saw nothing. So, I mean, really, representation in our society and our world is so important, and it hasn't happened until fairly recently for a lot of folks in terms of things like children's literature, books, movies. I mean, we could go on and on about it, right? And I really feel that many of the students that I work with have not felt reflected in their society, in their classroom, in popular media. It can go on, right? And that's an awful thing. And the problem with it, the scary thing about it, is that when we look at children and we see that how quickly they become, I don't mean indoctrinated, but how quickly that they're given all this bombardment of messages that shows that maybe they're like better than other people, or that worse yet, that they're not so good at all because they don't see themselves in the world. I mean, it's like a really big thing. It's like a really big deal, right? And so another quote that captures me is that Annie Dillard is a poet and a naturalist, and she did all this cool stuff. But I really like this because I love Alice in Wonderland, the tale of the book, not necessarily the Disney movie. So if you grew up in the U.S., you were bombarded with Disney movies, and I'm sure they're all over the place. We'll be talking about those some too. But so Annie Dillard talks about like how kind of creeped out she was about the some of the messages in Alice in Wonderland, where Alice was she would like drink a little potion and get bigger, or eat a little cookie and get smaller, and so this the idea that you can just shrink, shrink into nothingness. That you just get so small, you just like slip through the merest crack, the littlest crack, and become invisible. And she just thinks that's like kind of a scary, wretched notion, right? So I agree, and I think that has all to do with how you're representing the world or not representing the world. How you're affirmed to have, like, that you count, that you're of value, all those things. So in this class, how do we want to look at that? How do we want to remedy being rendered almost invisible when the subject matter, of course, is children's books, but it I think goes into so much more bigger stuff, right? And so how do we counter that? We question the designated default, right? So that's what we want to do in this class, is we want to go beyond some of the stereotypical images of all of our citizens in the society, and kind of look at, like, why are these messages repeated so often, and why is one culture reinforced and one identity reinforced so much more than other identities. But the really cool thing is, like, oh wow, there's so many great books now, right? So that's what we're going to look at in this class. That's one of my books I love, because remember, I'm kind of old. Blue-Nosed Witch. Didn't think about it until I really started digging into this stuff a couple decades ago about representation. And I love this book because the main character was a girl, and like when I was growing up, ooh, that wasn't happening at all. And she was so cool. She was a witch. She did really cool things, right? So it was a powerful book for me in terms of representation as a white child, a white girl growing up. That, oh my gosh, I just loved it. And, donuts and dressing up in Halloween, who wouldn't love that? So a question I have for you, just to think about for 1 second, like a story or a book that you really loved as a child. Like, why did it resonate for you, right? Why did you love it? There was something that you connected, and we want to connected with, and we want to make sure that there's so many more of those connections. I mean, I held on to this Blue-Nosed Witch because there really wasn't much more when I was growing up, and it's so much better. But that was for white kids, and now it's getting better for all other identities and stuff. But we need to get it better, right? We need to. Here goes my woo. We need to really look at all the wonderful books out there that help us just counter that dominant culture, that helps us just center all of the wonderfulness of all the different varieties of identities that we have in our society and in the world and stuff, and to be able to embrace that and really like go with it. Oh my gosh, when does this part end? But you know what I mean? It's that we really want to do that, and that's what I hope this class does for us and for you, is that you just get an idea that there's some cool books out there, and they could be something that you really connect with, or kids that you love can connect with. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at some awesome books. Oh my gosh, there's so many good ones. Oh gosh, that's such a cute one. Oh, I love that one. And because this is an intensive writing class, we're going to write a lot of words, right? We're going to look at books, and we're going to write a lot of words. So what does this mean? That lots and lots of writing, and then us kind of looking at some of the single stories, right? The danger of those single stories, and looking at ways that we can counter them with really good children's books. So some of the stuff in here is pretty sensitive to people. It's political. It's what? We're not going to all agree on things, right? So, but the messages that I want to impart in this class specifically is that when children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, or when the images they see are distorted, negative, or laughable, they learn a powerful lesson about how they are devalued in the society of which they are a part of. Right? And I mean, that is political. We can think of all sorts of things that are happening in our world right now, today, this second, that are as a result of us not respecting all of our citizens. or most of them. I like some of them I don't want to respect, but that we're not really giving everyone a fair shake. That we're just seeing people in different ways. So I think books can really help counter that. I think children's books can save the world. I got to say it again. I think they can. So we want to make sure that we really impart the idea. I don't like that word positivity, but you know what I mean? That we want to do this. We want to make sure that we're telling tales that everyone can connect to, that children can connect to. And again, I'm basing it in children's books, but it goes all over the place, right? Because we know, and you're going to see if you haven't looked at it, the fabulous TED Talk by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, when she says the single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with the stereotypes is not that they're always necessarily untrue, but they're incomplete. They only tell one tiny part of it. They make one story the only story, and that's what we want to get away from in here. We want to get away from the single story and just branch out, because there's so many stories out there. Dang, there's so many stories, okay? So thanks for listening to this. As always, I went on it much longer than I anticipated. Can you see Jupiter way down there at the end of the trail? I think I'll go take her for a walk right now. I'm a little tuckered out after this. Okay, thanks for listening.